Anne Frank. You've heard the name, right? It's known all over the world as a symbol of hope, even in the middle of the darkest tragedy. But behind that famous name was a real girl, a teenager who was funny, full of life, and had so many dreams. So today, we're going to explore her life, her words, and why her story still matters so much.
So these are the very first words Anne ever wrote in the diary she got for her 13th birthday. You can really hear the loneliness there, can't you? She was longing for a true friend, and she decided to find one in the pages of this little book. This diary would become her closest confidant, and, in the end, her voice to the entire world. To really understand Anne's story, we have to go back before the hiding, before that famous diary. We're going to start with her childhood in Germany, which was happy, pretty ordinary, and about to be completely shattered by history.
So Anneliese Marie Frank, she was born into what you'd call a pretty normal, comfortable German Jewish family. And I mean, they were really German. Their family had lived in the country for generations. Her dad, Otto, was even a decorated officer who fought for Germany in World War I. This is so important to remember, because they weren't outsiders. This was their home. The persecution they were about to face was a betrayal by their own country.
So what went so wrong? Well, it was the rise of the Nazi Party, led by Adolf Hitler. Their entire power was built on a foundation of extreme nationalism and this virulent, totally baseless hatred called anti-Semitism. Germany was in a bad place after World War I. The economy was a wreck, and national pride was wounded. The Nazis took advantage of that, and they wrongly blamed Jewish people for everything.
You know, their freedom wasn't snatched away overnight. It was this slow, creeping process. The family saw the writing on the wall and fled Germany in 1933 for Amsterdam, hoping for safety. But in 1940, the Nazis followed them, invading the Netherlands. Then the rights were stripped away one by one until the final straw. A call-up notice arrived for Anne's sister, Margot, ordering her to a so-called labor camp. That was it. That was the moment they knew they had to disappear. Life became absolutely suffocating. Just try to imagine it. You're banned from going to the park. You can't swim in a pool. Your own bike gets taken away. You can only shop at certain times. Every single one of these rules was designed to do one thing: to isolate Jewish people, to make them visible targets, and to dehumanize them.
So facing this impossible choice, the Frank family made a truly desperate decision. They decided to vanish. And this is where the next chapter of their story begins. A secret world where they would live for more than 2 years.
Their refuge was this space hidden right inside Otto Frank's business. Anne called it the Secret Annex, a series of rooms in the back of the building, totally invisible from the street and hidden behind a movable bookcase.
761 days. Let that sink in for a second. That is over 2 years without feeling the sun on your face or the wind in your hair. And in this tiny, hidden world, the Franks were not by themselves.
Okay, so who was in there? You had 8 people living basically on top of each other. First, the Frank family, of course. They were soon joined by the Van Pels family, Otto's business partner, his wife, and their teenage son, Peter. And then a few months later, a dentist named Fritz Pfeiffer arrived, becoming the 8th and final person in the annex. Life was governed by this incredibly tense routine. During business hours, it had to be dead silent. I mean, they could only whisper, they had to walk around in their socks, they couldn't even run the water because they were so afraid of being heard by the workers down below. The only relief came after everyone left for the day. Their entire survival depended on that silence, and on the incredible bravery of their helpers who risked their own lives to bring them food and news. And Anne herself described it better than anyone could. She said they were like a patch of blue sky surrounded by menacing black clouds. The annex was their little sanctuary, that tiny patch of blue. But the fear, those menacing black clouds of the world outside, was always there, always pressing in on them. So, in this world of silence and constant fear, how does a teenager even cope? She turned to her diary. And this is where the story shifts from just being about historical events to being a deeply personal journey.
Anne didn't just record what happened each day. No, she turned her diary into her best friend. She addressed her entries to Kitty, and in doing so, she created this safe, private world where she could pour out all of her hopes, her fears, and her frustrations.
A really big theme in her writing is this feeling of being misunderstood. She talked about having 2 selves. There was the outer Anne, the cheerful, talkative girl everyone in the annex saw. But then there was the inner Anne, this quiet, sensitive, deep-thinking person who was struggling to make sense of it all. And she felt like only Kitty, her diary, ever got to meet that person. And then, in 1944, something amazing happened. A switch flipped. Anne heard a Dutch official on the radio calling for people to save their wartime journals for history. Right then, she went from being a girl writing in her diary to a full-blown author. She started rewriting her entries, polishing them, with the dream of publishing a book. She wasn't just writing for herself anymore. She was consciously writing for us, for the future.
Now, you've probably heard this quote. It's maybe her most famous line. But what's so incredible is that this wasn't some naive, childish idea. In other parts of her diary, she writes about her despair and the awful things people are capable of. This belief in goodness was a conscious choice. It was a belief she fought to hold on to, even when surrounded by the absolute worst of humanity.
But even with all that hope, those menacing black clouds Anne wrote about were closing in. And this brings us to the final, tragic part of their time in hiding, and the beginning of her incredible legacy. Just 3 days after she wrote her last entry, it was over. The police raided the annex. To this day, we still don't know for sure how they were found. Maybe it was a betrayal, or maybe it was just a random discovery. But the end result was the same. All 8 of them were arrested.
And what happened next is just devastating. After their arrest, they were sent to the Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp. From there, they were scattered to other camps where they died from starvation, from disease, from exhaustion, from the gas chambers. 7 of the 8 people who hid in the secret annex were murdered.
1. Out of the 8 people who shared that tiny space for 761 days, only 1 person survived, Anne's father, Otto Frank. After the raid, one of their helpers, a woman named Miep Gies, did something incredibly brave. She went back into the annex and collected Anne's scattered diary pages. When Otto returned to Amsterdam, the only survivor, Miep gave them to him. She said, "Here is your daughter Anne's legacy." When he read her words, he discovered a side of his daughter he never fully knew, and he made it his life's mission to get her book published. And wow, what a legacy it became. The diary has been translated into more than 70 languages and has sold over 30 million copies all around the world. It has become one of the most essential books ever written because it gives a human face to a tragedy so huge it's almost impossible to comprehend.
I want to go on living, even after my death. That was Anne's wish, written in that tiny, hidden annex. And through her diary, she has. Her voice was not silenced. It continues to teach millions of us about the dangers of intolerance and hatred, but also about the incredible resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of hope.